The first snow of winter came early to the San Juan Mountains that year of 1883, falling in thick, suffocating sheets that turned the world white and silent as a grave. The wind howled through the peaks like a wounded animal, rattling the bare aspens and driving ice crystals sideways through the air. It was the kind of storm that made wise men seek shelter and fools seek their maker. Caleb Ward was neither wise nor foolish. He was simply running out of options. His horse struggled through the knee-deep drifts, steam rising from its heaving flanks in great clouds that the wind tore away instantly. Caleb hunched lower in the saddle, his weathered duster crusted with ice, one hand pressed against his ribs where blood had frozen his shirt to his skin. The scar that ran from his left cheekbone to his jaw ached in the cold, a phantom pain that always troubled him when the weather turned. Behind him, somewhere in the white fury of the storm, were 5 men who wanted him dead. He'd lost them 2 hours ago when the blizzard intensified, but they'd pick up his trail again come morning if he didn't find shelter. The weight of the leather pouch tucked inside his coat seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile. $30,000 in banknotes, enough to start a new life or end an old one, depending on who caught up with him first. The horse stumbled, nearly throwing him, and Caleb yanked the reins hard, left on instinct. Through the swirling snow, he caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong to the mountain, a straight line, too perfect for nature. Smoke, a thin gray thread rising from what might be a chimney, barely visible before the wind shredded it. "Come on, boy," he muttered to the horse, his voice cracked and raw. "Just a little further." The cabin materialized from the storm like something conjured from a dream. It sat in a small valley, protected on 3 sides by towering pines, with a barn and a modest corral attached. Smoke definitely rose from the stone chimney, and golden lamplight glowed warm through one frost-covered window. Caleb had seen paradise depicted in church windows back east, before the war, and he reckoned it looked something like this. He dismounted stiffly, leading his exhausted horse toward the barn. His legs nearly buckled when his boots hit the ground. The wound in his side had opened again during the ride, and he could feel fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. He needed to tend to the horse first, though a man who didn't care for his mount in weather like this deserved whatever fate found him. The barn door was barred from the outside. Caleb lifted the heavy beam with effort that made his vision gray at the edges. Inside, it was marginally warmer, smelling of hay and horses and safety. 2 stalls were occupied, a sturdy draft horse and a smaller mare, both well-fed and groomed. Someone here knew their business. He was rubbing down his horse with a handful of straw when he heard the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. "Turn around slow. Mister, hands where I can see them." The voice was female, steady despite an edge of fear. Caleb did as instructed, raising his hands shoulder high, though the movement sent fire through his wounded side. She stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the snow, a Henry rifle aimed at his chest. Even in the dim light, he could make out sharp cheekbones and determined eyes, not young, maybe late 20s, wearing a man's wool coat over a simple dress. A blue heeler dog stood beside her, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in its throat. "I don't mean any harm, ma'am," Caleb said carefully. "Just need shelter from the storm." "Plenty of shelter in town. Grantsville's 15 miles east." "Can't make 15 miles, not in this weather." He didn't mention the men hunting him. No need to complicate matters. Her eyes narrowed, taking in his ice-covered clothes, the way he favored his right side, the controlled stillness of a man who'd learned not to make sudden movements around pointed guns. "You running from the law?" "No, ma'am. Running from something, though." He didn't deny it. Lying to a woman pointing a rifle at you seemed like poor policy. She studied him for a long moment. The wind shrieked around the barn walls, and somewhere in the rafters, something creaked ominously. Finally, she lowered the rifle a fraction. "You're hurt." "Some." "How bad?" "Bad enough." Another long pause. The dog hadn't stopped growling. Caleb remained still, hands visible, letting her make her decision. He'd learned patience in places where impatience meant death. "What's your name?" Caleb Ward. You fight in the war. Caleb Ward. The question caught him off guard. Yes, ma'am. Which side? Does it matter? It might. He met her gaze directly. Union, 14th Connecticut Infantry. Something shifted in her expression, though he couldn't read what. She lowered the rifle completely, but kept it ready. I'm Ellie Mayhew. This is my place. She gestured with the rifle barrel. You can stay in the barn tonight. There's blankets in the tack room, and you can help yourself to grain for your horse. Come morning, you move on. Ma'am, I can pay. I don't want your money. Her voice turned hard. And I don't want trouble. You bring either to my door, and I'll shoot you myself. Clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. She backed out of the barn, the dog following reluctantly. Caleb heard the bar drop back into place, locking him in. He stood there a moment, listening to her footsteps fade toward the house, then slowly lowered his hands. The tack room was small but organized. He found the blankets she'd mentioned. Good wool, if a bit musty, and a tin of salve that might help with his wound. His horse was already drowsing in the stall he'd chosen, grateful to be out of the storm. Caleb eased himself down onto a pile of feed sacks, breathing shallow to minimize the pain. He should tend to the wound, but exhaustion pulled at him like quicksand. Just a few minutes rest. Then he'd deal with it. He must have passed out, because the next thing he knew, someone was shaking his shoulder. His hand went instinctively for the Colt at his hip, but small, strong fingers caught his wrist. Easy there. Ellie Mayhew knelt beside him, a lantern at her elbow casting wild shadows on the barn walls. She'd traded the rifle for a basket that steamed in the cold air. The dog sat a few feet away, watching him with suspicious yellow eyes. You were moaning loud enough to wake the dead, she said. Figured I'd better check before you actually joined them. Caleb tried to sit up. Couldn't quite manage it. I'm fine. Sure you are. She set the basket aside and studied him with eyes he now saw were gray, the color of winter sky. That's why you're bleeding all over my feed sacks. He looked down. The blood had soaked through his coat, leaving a dark stain on the burlap beneath him. I'll replace them. With what? The money I don't want. She shook her head. Men, always thinking they can buy their way out of bleeding to death. Before he could protest, she was unbuttoning his coat with business-like efficiency. He caught her wrist when she reached for his shirt. I can manage. No, you can't. She pulled free of his grip. You want to die of pride or live with a little help? Choose quick, because I've got no patience for fools. He let his hand fall. She peeled back his shirt, hissing softly at what she found. The bullet had gouged a furrow along his ribs. Not deep, but long and ugly. The cold had kept it from bleeding too badly, but movement had torn it open again. Bullet? Knife. He lied. She gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it, but didn't press. From the basket, she produced clean cloth, a bottle of what smelled like whiskey, and a needle with thread. This is going to hurt. I've had worse. I'm sure you have. She poured whiskey over the wound without warning. Caleb bit down hard on a curse, his vision going white. But that doesn't make it hurt less. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound and stitching it closed with steady hands. Caleb focused on breathing, on the circle of lantern light, on anything but the fire in his side. The dog had stopped growling, apparently deciding he wasn't an immediate threat. You've done this before, he said through gritted teeth. My husband worked the mines. Men came home bleeding more often than not. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but something flickered across her face. Got plenty of practice. Where is he now? Her hand stilled for just a moment. Dead. 2 years come spring. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't kill him. She tied off the last stitch and sat back. There, try not to tear those open, or I'll let you bleed out for the waste of good thread. She repacked her supplies and pulled something wrapped in cloth from the basket. Cornbread and stew. Nothing fancy, but it's hot. The smell hit him like a physical thing. He couldn't remember his last real meal. Trail rations and fear had been his only sustenance for days. "Why?" he asked as she stood to leave. She paused at the barn door. "Because I'm not the kind of person who lets a man freeze to death 50 feet from my fire. Don't make me regret it." "I meant what I said about paying. I could give you enough to keep your money, Mr. Ward. Whatever you're running from. I don't want it following you to my door." She lifted the bar. "There's a pump by the 3rd stall if you need water. Come morning, you ride on. We clear." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once and stepped out into the storm, the dog at her heels. The bar dropped back into place with a sound like finality. Caleb ate slowly, savoring the first hot food he'd had in a week. The stew was simple but good. Venison, potatoes, wild onions, the kind of meal that spoke of someone who knew how to make do with what the land provided. Through a gap in the barn wall, he could see the house, that warm light still glowing in the window. He wondered what kind of woman chose to live alone in this wilderness, miles from town, with only a dog for company. The wedding ring on her finger suggested she hadn't chosen it so much as had it chosen for her. He finished eating and wrapped himself in the blankets, settling back against the feed sacks. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Those men hunting him would have to hole up somewhere too. Maybe he'd bought himself enough time to figure out his next move. As sleep pulled at him again, Caleb found himself thinking about gray eyes and steady hands, about the kind of courage it took to open your door to a stranger in a storm. He'd pay her for the shelter, whether she wanted it or not. Leave the money where she'd find it after he left. It was the least he could do for the woman who'd probably saved his life. Even if she'd done it at rifle point. The wind howled on, and somewhere in the house, he thought he heard singing, a woman's voice, low and sweet, threading through the storm like a promise of spring. The storm broke 3 days later, leaving the world crystalline and sharp under a pale winter sun. Caleb stood in the barn doorway, studying the transformed landscape. Drifts reached halfway up the fence posts, and the pines wore heavy mantles of white. Beautiful, if you weren't trying to run from something. His horse nickered softly from the stall. The rest had done the animal good, and the grain Ellie Mayhew had grudgingly allowed him to use had put flesh back on its ribs. Caleb flexed his side experimentally. The stitches held, though the movement still sent twinges of pain through his ribs. Time to move on. He'd pushed his luck staying this long. He was saddling his horse when he heard her voice, sharp with frustration, coming from somewhere behind the barn. Caleb paused, then led his horse out the back door to investigate. Ellie stood knee-deep in snow beside the chicken coop, wrestling with a section of roof that had partially collapsed under the storm's weight. The blue heeler, Buck, he'd learned the dog's name was, danced around her feet, barking at the offending timber as if that might help. "Need a hand?" Caleb called. She spun, nearly losing her balance in the snow. "You're still here. Was just leaving." He gestured to his saddled horse. "But I could help with that first." "I don't need—" The roof section chose that moment to shift, dumping a load of snow directly on her head. She emerged sputtering, murder in her gray eyes. Caleb bit back a smile. "That roof's too heavy for one person. Let me help, then I'll be on my way." She looked from him to the damaged coop, where several hens pecked morosely at the snow. Pride warred with practicality in her expression. Practicality won. "Fine, but then you leave." He tied his horse to a fence post and waded through the snow to join her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly from exertion. She had probably been out here since dawn, trying to handle everything herself. They worked in silence, Caleb lifting the heavy beam while Ellie guided it back into place. His wound protested, but he ignored it. Together, they managed to shore up the damaged section with spare lumber from the barn. "There," Ellie said, stepping back to survey their work. "That should hold until spring. You'll need to replace those support posts come warmer weather. They're half rotted through." She gave him a sharp look. "You a carpenter? Did some building before the war, among other things he didn't mention." "Well, I appreciate the advice, Mr. Ward." And the help. She pulled off her work gloves, tucking them into her coat pocket. Now, about that leaving. A cry from inside the coop cut her off. One of the hens had gotten tangled in some loose wire, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. Ellie rushed inside, kneeling in the dirty straw. "Easy, girl, easy." She tried to free the bird, but it thrashed harder, driving the wire deeper. Blood spotted the white feathers. Caleb knelt beside her. "Let me—" His hands, scarred and rough as they were, moved with surprising gentleness. He'd learned field surgery out of necessity, and a chicken wasn't so different from a wounded soldier when you got down to it. Within moments, he'd freed the bird and fashioned a simple splint from twigs and cloth torn from his own shirt. Ellie watched in silence as he worked, something unreadable in her expression. When he finished, she took the hen carefully, cradling it against her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. Most men would have said to wring its neck and be done with it. "Seems a waste. She'll heal up fine if you keep her quiet for a few weeks. You talk like someone who knows about healing." He stood, brushing straw from his knees. "I know more about the opposite." She studied him for a long moment. Then, "You hungry? Least I can do is feed you before you go." "I shouldn't." "It's just breakfast. Mr. Ward, I'm not asking you to marry me." The house was simple but clean, everything in its place. A rifle sat propped by the door, and another hung above the fireplace. The furniture was handmade but solid, the kind passed down through generations. A shelf held a few books, their spines worn from reading. The whole place smelled of wood smoke and coffee and something indefinably homey. Caleb felt like a trespasser. Ellie set the injured hen in a box by the stove and gestured him to the table. She moved efficiently around the kitchen, frying eggs and thick slices of bacon, her movements automatic from long practice. Buck positioned himself between Caleb and his mistress, ever watchful. "Coffee?" she asked without turning around. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." She brought 2 cups, strong and black, then returned with the loaded plates. The food was simple but plentiful, and Caleb found himself eating with more appetite than he'd had in months. "So," Ellie said after a few minutes of silence, "are they likely to come looking for you here?" He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "What makes you think—" "Please." She sipped her coffee. "A man doesn't ride into a blizzard with a knife wound. Excuse me, a knife wound, unless something's chasing him. And you keep checking the windows like you expect the devil himself to come calling." Caleb set down his fork. "They won't track me here. Storm would have covered any sign. But they'll keep looking." "Yes? What did you do? Does it matter?" She considered this. "I suppose not. A man's past is his own business." She paused. "Unless it's about to become my business, too." "It won't. I'll be gone within the hour. In this snow, your horse won't make 5 miles before going lame." She was right, and they both knew it. The drifts were too deep, the ice beneath too treacherous, but staying put her at risk, and he'd brought enough death to innocent people. "I'll manage." "No," she said flatly. "You won't, and I won't have your death on my conscience because I sent you out to freeze." She refilled his coffee cup with a decisive motion. "You can work for your keep until the road's clear. That roof's not the only thing that needs fixing around here. Ma'am, my name is Ellie. Or Mrs. Mayhew, if you must. But stop mamming me like I'm some delicate flower." She fixed him with those steady gray eyes. "I've buried a husband, survived 2 winters alone, and shot 3 men who thought a widow meant easy pickings. I can handle whatever trouble you're carrying. Mr. Ward, question is whether you can handle honest work." Caleb found himself almost smiling. "I can work." "Good. You can start by fixing the barn door. The latch is broken and the bottom hinge is loose." She stood, gathering the plates. "There's tools in the barn, and lumber in the lean-to. Supper's at 6. Don't be late." And just like that, he was dismissed. Caleb rose, uncertain how he'd lost control of the situation so thoroughly. "I still intend to pay you." She whirled on him, eyes flashing. "If you mention payment one more time, I'll shoot you myself. I'm not some charity case. Mr. Ward, you work. I feed you and give you shelter. Fair trade. That's how it's done out here. Yes, he caught himself. Mrs. Mayhew. Better. She turned back to the dishes. And, Mr. Ward, whatever you're running from, you'd best figure out if it's worth dying for, because that's where running in winter leads. Caleb headed back to the barn, her words trailing him like smoke. The barn door was indeed broken, and it gave him something to focus on besides the woman who'd just rearranged his plans with the force of her will alone. He worked through the morning, fixing not just the door but a dozen other things that caught his eye. The work felt good, honest in a way he'd almost forgotten. His hands remembered the rhythm of hammer and nail, the satisfaction of making something whole again. Ellie appeared at noon with sandwiches and hot cider. She inspected his work with a critical eye, nodding approval. You weren't lying about the carpentry. I don't make a habit of lying. Everyone lies, Mr. Ward. Just about different things. She handed him the food. The smokehouse needs attention when you're done here. Lost some meat to raccoons last month. She left before he could respond, Buck trotting at her heels. Caleb watched her cross the yard, back straight, stride purposeful despite the deep snow. There was strength in her that had nothing to do with physical power, a kind of bedrock stubbornness that probably kept her alive out here. He ate his lunch and got back to work, trying not to think about how easy it was to fall into this rhythm. By evening, he'd repaired the barn door, reinforced the smokehouse, and chopped enough wood to last a week. Supper was venison stew again, but Caleb didn't complain. They ate in comfortable silence. The only sounds, the crackle of the fire and Buck's occasional sigh from his spot by the stove. The injured hen clucked softly from its box, already looking better. My husband built this place, Ellie said suddenly. Thomas came out here with dreams of gold, ended up working another man's mine for wages. She stared into her coffee cup. Always said he'd strike it rich someday. Build me a proper house in town, with lace curtains and a piano. What happened? Cave in. They brought him home on a board. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. Town people said I should sell, move back east to my sister. But this is my home. Tom's buried on the hill behind the house. Couldn't leave him here alone. Caleb understood that kind of loyalty to the dead. He carried his own ghosts, though they didn't rest as peacefully as Thomas Mayhew. Must be hard, managing alone. Hard's relative. She rose, collecting the dishes again. Being beholden to others is harder, at least here. I succeed or fail on my own terms. He helped clear the table without being asked, falling into the domestic rhythm as easily as he'd taken to the repairs. Ellie washed while he dried, working side by side in the warm kitchen while outside. The wind picked up again. Another storm coming, she observed, glancing out the window. You can sleep in the house tonight. There's a cot in the storeroom. The barn's fine. The barn's freezing, and you'll tear those stitches shivering. She handed him the last plate. Storeroom's off the kitchen. There's blankets in the chest. She headed for the stairs, Buck following. At the bottom step, she paused. Mr. Ward, whatever you're running from, I hope it's worth what you're running toward. Then she was gone, leaving Caleb alone with the dying fire and the sound of wind rattling the windows. He found the storeroom, small but warm, with a narrow cot and a chest of quilts that smelled of lavender. Better accommodation than he'd had in years. He lay in the dark, listening to the house settle around him. Overhead, floorboards creaked as Ellie moved about, preparing for bed. Such ordinary sounds, yet they stirred something in him he'd thought dead, a longing for the simple life he'd forfeited long ago. Tomorrow he'd work again, fix whatever needed fixing, earn his keep, and when the snow melted enough to travel, he'd leave, taking his shadows with him. It was the only kindness he could offer the woman who'd shown him more grace than he deserved. But tonight, warm and fed and sheltered, Caleb Ward allowed himself to pretend he was just a man, working for his keep, with nothing chasing him but the promise of spring. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of work and quiet companionship. The predicted storm had lasted 3 days, sealing them in a world of white silence. Caleb repaired everything he could find: loose boards, broken hinges, gaps in the walls where wind whistled through. Ellie cooked, tended her animals, and mended clothes by the fire in the evening while he carved new handles for broken tools. They talked little at first, but gradually the silence became less guarded. She told him about growing up in Ohio, the fourth daughter of a minister who'd believed women needed only enough education to read the Bible. How she'd taught herself from her brother's discarded school books, hungry for knowledge her father deemed unnecessary. Thomas understood, she said one evening, fingers busy with her sewing. He'd bring me books from town, hidden in his saddlebags like contraband. Poetry, mostly, some history. Caleb was sharpening knives at the table, the rhythmic whisper of steel on stone filling the quiet moments. You still read them? Every night. She glanced toward the shelf. Words don't leave you like people do. He understood that too well. Words, like scars, stayed with you. Some nights he still heard them, orders given, prayers whispered, last words of dying men, but he didn't say this. Instead, he tested the knife's edge against his thumb and moved on to the next blade. Buck had gradually accepted his presence, even deigning to lie near his feet by the fire. The hen, Ellie had named her Constance, was healing well, pecking grain from Ellie's hand and clucking contentedly from her box. It was almost peaceful, almost like belonging somewhere. The third week, Caleb was splitting wood behind the house when he noticed fresh wolf tracks in the snow. Large prints, probably a small pack hunting the scarce winter game. He mentioned it to Ellie at lunch. They come down from the high country when the snows are bad, she said. Haven't lost any stock to them yet, but I keep the rifle handy. That evening, he reinforced the chicken coop and checked the barn doors again. Wolves were bold when hungry, and a woman alone made an inviting target. The thought unsettled him more than it should have. He was heading back to the house when he saw it, his wooden box, sitting on the storeroom cot, the one he'd hidden beneath loose floorboards in the barn. His blood went cold. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded, face unreadable. The box lay open between them, its contents visible: the leather pouch of money, a collection of letters tied with string, a silver pocket watch, and at the bottom, a photograph of a woman and young girl. You went through my things. His voice came out flat, controlled. No, Buck did. Found him dragging it across the barn this morning. Seems he's been digging where he shouldn't. She met his gaze steadily. Though I'd say the same applies to you, Mr. Ward. Caleb stood frozen in the doorway. Nobody touched that box. Nobody. His hand moved instinctively toward where his gun would be, though he wasn't wearing it. That's $30,000, Ellie continued, her voice calm. Enough to buy 3 ranches like this one, or run a long, long way. It's not what you think. I think it's blood money. I think those men hunting you want it back, and I think you've been lying to me since you arrived. She stood slowly. The question is, whose blood paid for it? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Caleb forced himself to enter the room, to approach the table like approaching a scaffold. He picked up the photograph with careful hands. Her name was Margaret, my wife. The words felt rusty, unused. The girl was our daughter, Clara. She'd be 12 now, if she lived. Ellie's expression softened almost imperceptibly. What happened? I happened. He set the photograph down gently. I was in Georgia when the war ended. Took me 8 months to get home, walking, mostly, when I could walk, working when I could find it. By the time I reached Connecticut, they were both gone. Cholera outbreak, my whole street. Near enough. He picked up the letters, yellowed with age. These are from her. One for every month I was gone. She never got my replies. Mail didn't run regular to the front. Kept writing anyway. Right up until... I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices. He touched the pocket watch. This was my father's. About the only honest thing in that box. And the money? Here was the moment. The truth that would send him back into the snow. But he found he was tired of running from it. Train job, outside Denver, last spring. He met her eyes, needing her to understand. I fell in with some men after the war. Desperate men who'd lost everything. Told myself we were evening the score, taking from the railroads that had gotten rich while we bled. Just one job, I said. Just enough to start over. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough. He laughed bitterly. We hit the payroll car. $30,000 in cash meant for some mining operation. Clean job. Nobody was supposed to get hurt, but the guard was young, nervous. He went for his gun. The memory flashed vivid. The kid's eyes, wide with fear. The gun wavering in his shaking hand. The moment of decision. I shot him in the shoulder, winged him to make him drop the gun. But Jenkins, one of our crew, he finished it. Put a bullet in the boy's head while he lay there bleeding. Caleb's hands clenched. I beat Jenkins half to death for it. Split the gang down the middle. Now half want me dead for the money. Half want me dead for turning on them. And you've been running ever since. 7 months now. He gestured to the box. Can't spend it. Can't give it back. Can't bring that boy back to life. So I carry it, like penance. Like it means something. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and closed the box, pushing it toward him. We all carry our dead, Mr. Ward. Question is whether we let them bury us too. You don't understand. Don't I? Fire flashed in her eyes. You think you're the only one with ghosts? The only one who made choices that haunt them? She moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Thomas didn't die in a cave-in. Not exactly. There was an accident, yes, but he lived 3 days after. 3 days of agony while I sat beside him, praying for God to take him. When the prayers didn't work, her voice caught. I helped him along, laudanum in his whiskey, enough to let him sleep and not wake up. The confession hung between them like a physical presence. The town doesn't know. They think he died from his injuries. But I know. Every night. I know. She turned back to him. So don't tell me about carrying guilt. Caleb Ward, I've got my own load to bear. They stood there, two people stripped of pretense, seeing each other clearly for the first time. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, like ice cracking on a frozen river. Why tell me? Because you needed to hear it. Because somebody needs to know the truth before I take it to my grave. She moved back to the table. And because I'm tired of being careful around you, like you're made of glass. You're not the only broken person in this room. Without thinking, Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were calloused from work, strong and capable, but they trembled slightly in his grasp. Ellie, don't. She pulled away, but gently. We're not there yet. Maybe won't ever be. But at least now there's truth between us. That night, storm clouds gathered again, heavy and promising. They ate dinner in silence, but it was different now. Not the careful quiet of strangers, but the thoughtful pause of people recalibrating their understanding of each other. After dinner, Ellie surprised him by bringing out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Seems like a night for it. They sat by the fire, drinking slowly, watching the flames. Buck snored at their feet, occasionally twitching in his dreams. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I dream about him sometimes, Ellie said quietly. Thomas, he's always asking me why. I never have an answer that satisfies him. I dream about all of them. The men I killed in the war, that boy from the train. They just stand there, waiting for explanations I don't have. Maybe that's our punishment. Not the dying, but the living after. Caleb considered this. Maybe, or maybe it's just what happens when you survive things you weren't supposed to. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the secrets they'd shared. Is that what we're doing? Surviving? I don't know, he admitted, but it's better than running. Later, much later, after the whiskey was gone and the fire burned low, they found themselves standing close in the dim kitchen. Ellie had risen to go to bed, and Caleb had stood without thinking, drawn by something he couldn't name. They were inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility. Her eyes were dark in the lamplight, searching his face for something. Permission, maybe, or absolution. "Caleb," she whispered, and his name on her lips was like a key turning in a lock. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, tentative at first, then with growing heat. Her hands came up to rest against his chest, and he could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, 7 months of loneliness and 3 weeks of careful distance dissolving in an instant. She tasted of whiskey and honesty, of sorrow transformed into something sharper, needier. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she made a small sound that nearly undid him. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. Caleb pulled back, breathing hard, his hands shaking where they rested on her waist. "I can't," he said roughly. "I'm no good for you, Ellie. I've got nothing to offer but trouble and blood money." "I didn't ask for anything." Her voice was steady despite the flush in her cheeks. "Just a moment of feeling something besides duty and guilt. Is that so wrong?" "Yes, because you deserve better than moments. You deserve a man who can stay, who can build something with you. I'm not that man." "Then why did you kiss me?" "Because I'm selfish. Because for just a second, I wanted to pretend I could be." He stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. "I'll leave tomorrow. The snow's clear enough." "No." The word cracked like a whip. "You don't get to decide what I deserve, and you don't get to run because you're scared of wanting something good. Ellie, go to bed. Caleb, we'll sort this out in the morning." She turned and headed for the stairs, pausing at the bottom. "And stop thinking you're protecting me. I've buried one man already. I know exactly how much loving someone can cost." She left him standing there, torn between the urge to follow and the knowledge that he shouldn't. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft as secrets in the darkness. Caleb stood there a long time, tasting her on his lips, feeling the phantom warmth of her in his arms. Then he banked the fire, checked the locks, and retreated to his small room. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, he lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about broken people and second chances, about the difference between surviving and living, about a woman strong enough to shoot straight and tell hard truths, who kissed like she was drowning and he was air. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he'd leave. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. Ellie was right. He was scared. Not of the men hunting him or the law that might catch up, but of the possibility that he might actually deserve the redemption she offered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white like a clean slate, like forgiveness made manifest. And somewhere overhead, Ellie Mayhew lay awake too, touching her lips and wondering if broken people could ever make each other whole. Morning came wrapped in silence. The kiss hung between them like smoke in still air, present but unacknowledged. Caleb found Ellie in the barn, milking the cow, her movements sharp and efficient. "Storm's getting worse," she said without looking up. "Radio in town says it could last a week." There was no radio in town. They both knew it, but the fiction gave them something to hide behind. "I'll check the livestock," he offered. "Already done." They moved around each other carefully for 3 days, polite as strangers, aware as lovers. Every accidental brush of hands sent sparks through the air. Every shared glance held weight, but neither spoke of what had passed between them. And the tension wound tighter with each passing hour. On the 4th night, Caleb found her sitting on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in a heavy blanket, staring out at the white expanse. He hesitated, then joined her, maintaining careful distance. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Rarely can." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Thomas used to say I thought too loud." They sat in silence, breath misting in the frigid air. Above them, stars wheeled in a clear sky, indifferent to human struggles. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about what you said, about deserving better." "Ellie, let me finish." She turned to face him. "You know what I deserve?" to make my own choices, to decide what risks I'm willing to take. You don't get to make those decisions for me. It's not that simple, isn't it? She stood, the blanket falling away. You think I don't know you'll leave eventually? You think I'm some foolish girl dreaming of forever? I don't think you're foolish. Then stop treating me like I am. She moved closer, close enough that he could see the frustration in her eyes. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty, for however long we have. And when those men find me, when I bring death to your door, then we'll face it, together or apart, but at least we'll have faced it. Her hand came up to rest against his chest. I've lived careful for 2 years. Caleb, stayed safe and proper and alone. Where has it gotten me? He caught her hand, intending to push it away. Instead, he found himself holding it against his heart. You don't understand what you're risking. Don't I? She stepped closer, her free hand coming up to trace the scar on his face. Every day is a risk out here. Wolves, weather, sickness, accidents. At least this risk comes with something worth having. Her touch undid him. Weeks of want, years of loneliness, a lifetime of running, all of it crumbled under the simple pressure of her fingers on his skin. Ellie, he said, her name a prayer and a curse. Choose, she whispered. Stop running for one night and choose. He chose. The kiss was different this time, desperate, hungry, full of promises neither could make. She pressed against him, all warmth and need, and he pulled her closer, trying to memorize the feel of her, the taste, the small sounds she made. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she took his hand. Come inside. He followed, past all his better judgment, through the kitchen and up the stairs he'd never climbed. Her room was simple, dominated by a brass bed and a window that looked out toward the hill where Thomas lay buried. She lit a lamp with shaking hands, then turned to face him. In the golden light, she was beautiful, not in the way of painted ladies or society belles, but in the way of hard work and honest living, of strength earned through survival. Are you sure? He asked, giving her one last chance to see sense. Instead of answering, she began unbuttoning her dress. Her hands were steady now, her eyes never leaving his. Help me forget. Caleb, just for tonight, help me remember what it feels like to be alive. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands replacing hers, moving with reverent care. Each revealed inch of skin was a gift, a trust he didn't deserve but couldn't refuse. She shivered under his touch, from cold or anticipation, or both, when his shirt joined her dress on the floor. She traced the map of scars across his chest and back, battle wounds. She realized, each one a story of survival. So much pain, she murmured. Not tonight, he said, catching her hand, kissing her palm. No pain tonight. They came together like storm fronts colliding, all heated skin and urgent whispers. The bed creaked under their weight, a sound that would have embarrassed them in daylight but seemed right in the lamplit darkness. She was fierce beneath him, meeting his passion with her own, her nails tracing new marks over old scars. For a time, there was nothing but this, the taste of her throat, the arch of her back, the way she said his name like absolution. They moved together, learning each other's rhythms, finding grace in the joining of 2 damaged souls. After, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers combed through her dark hair, gentle now, wondering. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said quietly. Liar. She smiled against his skin. You meant it the moment you kissed me in the kitchen. Maybe before that. How long before? He considered. When you pointed that rifle at me in the barn. Thought to myself, any woman brave enough to face down a stranger in a storm is worth knowing. And was I? Worth knowing? Worth more than that? He tightened his arms around her. Worth staying for. She lifted her head to look at him. Then stay. Ellie. Not forever. I'm not asking for forever. Just stay until you can't. She laid her head back down. Give us that much. He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, all right. They made no other promises that night. When dawn crept gray through the windows, they were still wrapped around each other, having found temporary peace in the shelter of shared warmth and accepted truths. But morning brought reality. Caleb woke to find Ellie already dressed, standing by the window with Buck alert at her side. "What is it?" "Riders," she said tersely. "3 of them, coming up the valley." He was out of bed and reaching for his gun before she finished speaking. Through the window, he could see them, dark shapes against the snow, moving with the purposeful pace of men on a mission. "Could be anyone," Ellie said, but her hand was already moving toward the rifle by the door. "It's not." Caleb recognized the lead rider's posture, the way he sat his horse. "That's Marcus Jenkins, the one I told you about. The one who killed the boy. The same." He was already pulling on his clothes, checking his weapons. "They tracked me somehow. Maybe someone in town saw me, or doesn't matter how." She turned from the window. "All business now. What matters is, they're here. What do we do?" He loved her for that "we," even as it terrified him. "You don't do anything. This is my fight. This is my land. That makes it my fight." She picked up the rifle, checking the load with practiced efficiency. "Besides, you think they'll just tip their hats and leave if you're not here? They'll figure you've been here. They'll want to know what I know." She was right. By staying, he'd painted a target on her back. Everything he'd tried to avoid had come to pass. "There's an old mine shaft about a mile up the mountain," Ellie said, thinking fast. "We could—" "No." His voice was flat, final. "No more running. Caleb, I'm done, Ellie. Done running, done hiding, done dragging good people into my mess." He strapped on his gun belt. "But you're right about one thing. This is your land, your home. You have a right to defend it." She studied his face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Marcus Jenkins has been a plague on this world long enough." He checked his rifle, his movements calm and methodical. "I'm thinking those men down there came here for blood. Only question is whose they get. 3 against 1 isn't odds I like. Then it's good there's 2 of us. Caleb," he crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. When this starts, you stay inside. Cover the windows. If anyone gets past me, no one's getting past you." She leaned into his touch. "Because I'll be right beside you. Ellie, please. My land, my fight, my choice." She pulled away. All steel now. "You don't get to protect me from this, not after last night." He wanted to argue, but the riders were getting closer. Through the window, he could see them more clearly now. Jenkins in the lead, his black coat making him look like a carrion crow against the snow. The Paulson brothers flanking him, both mean as snakes and twice as quick. "They'll try to talk first," Caleb said. Thinking tactically now. "Jenkins likes to play with his food. We can use that, maybe position ourselves better." "The barn," Ellie suggested. "Good cover, clear line of sight to the house and the approach." He nodded. It was a good plan. They moved quickly, Ellie throwing on her coat while Caleb gathered ammunition. Buck whined, sensing the tension. "Keep him inside," Ellie told the dog. "Guard the house." They slipped out the back, using the woodshed for cover as they made their way to the barn. The riders were perhaps 200 yards out now, taking their time, confident in their numbers. Inside the barn, they took positions, Caleb at the main door, Ellie at the hayloft window. She was a shadow with that rifle, near invisible in the dim light. "Ellie," he called softly. "Whatever happens." "Save it for after," she cut him off. "Tell me all the pretty words when we're done." Despite everything, he almost smiled. Then Jenkins' voice rang out across the snow, and there was no more time for words. "Ward, Caleb Ward, we know you're in there. Come on out, and we'll make this quick." Caleb stepped into the doorway, rifle casual in his hands. "Marcus, been a while. 7 months." Jenkins reined up just outside rifle range, his hand resting on his pistol. 7 months of tracking you across this godforsaken territory. You've led us quite a chase. Sorry to inconvenience you." Oh, it's no inconvenience. I've rather enjoyed it, like hunting a particularly clever fox. Jenkins's smile was all teeth. Though I am disappointed. Hiding behind a woman's skirts? That's not the Caleb Ward I knew. I'm not hiding behind anyone. No. Then what do you call this? He gestured to the homestead. Playing house with some frontier widow while honest thieves go without their share. Your share's back in Denver, with that boy's blood on it. Jenkins's face hardened. That boy was reaching for a gun. That boy was scared. He was down. It was done. Caleb stepped fully out of the barn, drawing their attention. But you had to finish it. Had to show how tough you were. And you had to play hero, beat me near to death over some railroad guard. Jenkins shifted in his saddle. Well, here's where that righteousness gets you. Last chance. Ward, the money for your life. Simple trade. No trade. Then we take it anyway. And maybe have some fun with your woman after. Paulson here's been talking about her all the way from town. Says she's a pretty little thing, even if she is used goods. The younger Paulson laughed. An ugly sound. Widow women are always grateful for the attention. Caleb saw red. His hand moved toward his gun, but Jenkins was already drawing. None of that, boys. The Paulson brothers spread out, flanking wide, a classic pincer movement. They'd done this before. Here's what happens now, Jenkins continued. You drop that rifle, then you get the money. Then maybe, if I'm feeling generous, I let you watch while the shot came from above and behind. Taking the older Paulson's hat clean off, everyone froze. Next one goes through something more important. Ellie called from the loft. Get off my land! Jenkins's eyes flicked up, calculating distance and angle. Well, the widow has teeth. Last warning, Ellie said calmly. I think not. Jenkins smiled. Boys, light it up. Everything happened at once. The Paulsons went for their guns. Caleb dove sideways, bringing his rifle up. Ellie's rifle cracked again from above. The younger Paulson spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. His brother fired wild at the loft, splinters exploding from the wood near Ellie's position. Caleb's shot took him center mass. He toppled from his horse without a sound. Jenkins had his pistol out, firing rapidly at Caleb, forcing him back into the barn. Bullets whined past, thudding into wood. Caleb rolled behind a feed bin, came up shooting. Is this what you wanted, Ward? Jenkins shouted, reloading with practiced speed. All this death over money you can't even spend? It was never about the money. Caleb called back. No, then what? Your precious conscience. Another shot, closer this time. How many men you kill in the war, Caleb? What's one more guard to add to the pile? Ellie fired again, but Jenkins had moved, using his horse for cover. The animal screamed and went down. Jenkins rolled clear, came up behind a water trough. Tough spot. Ward, can't get to me without exposing yourself. Can't wait me out with your woman up there. What's it going to be? Caleb knew he was right. The geometry was all wrong. Someone had to move, had to take the risk. He was calculating his chances when he heard it. Buck, barking furiously from the house. Then Ellie's sharp intake of breath from above. Caleb, the wounded one. He's going for the house. The younger Paulson, bleeding but mobile, was stumbling toward the kitchen door. If he got inside, got behind Ellie. Caleb moved without thinking. Out of cover, into the open. Rifle coming up. He saw Jenkins rising from behind the trough. Saw the pistol swing toward him. Knew he was too exposed, too slow. The shot was impossibly loud. But it was Jenkins who staggered, looking down in surprise at the spreading red across his chest. Behind him, Ellie stood at the top of the loft ladder, smoke curling from her rifle. Jenkins dropped to his knees. You, the widow. My land, Ellie said simply. My fight. Jenkins fell forward into the snow and didn't move again. Caleb was already running for the house. He found the younger Paulson collapsed on the porch, Buck standing guard, growling low. The man was alive, but not by much, blood pooling beneath him. Please, Paulson gasped. Don't let me die like this. Caleb knelt beside him. The wound was bad. Ellie's shot had done more damage than it seemed. "Where are the others? Who else knows I'm here?" "Just us. Jenkins. Kept it quiet. Wanted the money. For ourselves." Paulson coughed. Specks of red on his lips. "Didn't think. She'd fight. People protect what's theirs," Caleb said quietly. Paulson's eyes were already glazing. "Tell my ma. Tell her." But whatever message he wanted sent died with him. Ellie appeared at Caleb's shoulder, still holding her rifle. Her face was pale but composed. "Is he—" "Yeah." They stood there a moment, looking down at the body. Then Ellie said, "We need to bury them. Ground's frozen, but there's tools in the barn." "Ellie, don't." She turned to face him. "Don't you dare apologize. They came here. They threatened us. We defended ourselves. That's all there is. You killed a man. To save you. I'd do it again." She touched his arm. "Question is, can you live with that?" He pulled her close, held her tight. She was shaking now, the reaction setting in. "I can live with anything if you're all right." "I'm all right." Her voice was muffled against his chest. "But Caleb? What that one said, about it being just them, do you believe it?" "Yeah, Jenkins was always secretive. He wouldn't want to split the take any more than he had to." "Then it's over." "This part is." He pulled back to look at her. "But there's still the money. And what I did, that doesn't go away." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. But maybe it doesn't have to define everything either." They spent the rest of the day dealing with the dead. 3 graves on the far side of the valley, marked with simple stones. Caleb said no words over them. Some men didn't deserve prayers. That night, they sat close by the fire, not talking much. Buck lay between them, occasionally whining at the scent of gunpowder that still clung to their clothes. "I've been thinking," Ellie said eventually, "about the money. What about it? That boy who died? Did he have family?" "I don't know. Probably. You could find out. Send it to them, anonymously." She stared into the flames. "Blood money, you called it. Maybe it could be something else. Restitution. A chance for his family to have something from his loss." Caleb considered this. "And if they can't be found? Then orphanages, widows' funds. Somewhere it might do good instead of harm." She looked at him. "You can't undo what happened, but you can choose what happens next." "What about us? What happens next with us?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Today I killed a man to save you. Yesterday we—" She blushed slightly. "Things are moving fast. Too fast? Maybe. Or maybe when you've been standing still for 2 years, any movement feels like running." She reached over, took his hand. "I meant what I said. I'm not asking for forever, but I'm not sorry for any of it either." "Neither am I." They sat holding hands while the fire died down. 2 killers finding solace in shared understanding. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the graves and the blood and the tracks of violence, leaving the world clean and white and full of possibility. Come morning, there would be decisions to make, the money to deal with, the future to face. But tonight, they had survived. They had chosen. And for now, that was enough. The peace lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, Caleb woke to Buck's frantic barking and the sound of multiple horses approaching. He reached for his gun before his eyes were fully open. The events with Jenkins still raw in his memory. "Easy," Ellie said from the window. She was already dressed, rifle in hand but not raised. "It's Sheriff Morrison from town. 4 deputies with him." Caleb joined her at the window. The lawmen approached slowly, spread out but not in attack formation. Morrison, a grizzled man in his 50s, rode slightly ahead. "They know," Caleb said quietly. "Maybe, maybe not." Ellie set her rifle aside. "Let me do the talking." They met the sheriff on the porch. Morrison touched his hat to Ellie, his eyes taking in everything. The defensive positions, the freshly disturbed snow where they'd dragged the bodies, the wariness in their stances. "Mrs. Mayhew, heard you might have had some trouble out here." "What kind of trouble would that be, Sheriff?" The kind that leaves 3 horses wandering into town without riders. One of them had blood on the saddle. His gaze shifted to Caleb. "Don't believe we've met, friend. Caleb Ward. I've been working for Mrs. Mayhew through the winter." "That's so." Morrison studied him with lawman's eyes, cataloging details. "Funny thing. Had a wire from Denver a few months back. Some trouble up there involving a man named Ward. Course, that's a common enough name." Ellie stepped forward. "Sheriff, 3 men came onto my property 4 days ago. Made threats. We defended ourselves." "We? Is it?" Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "And where might these men be now?" "Buried. Christian burial. Even though they didn't deserve it." Ellie's voice was steady. "They drew first. Ask anyone in town about my reputation. Sheriff, I don't look for trouble." "No, ma'am, you don't. But seems trouble found you anyway." He shifted in his saddle. "Mind if we take a look around? Just to satisfy the legal requirements." It wasn't really a request. Ellie nodded. "Of course. Caleb, show the deputies to the graves." The search was thorough but respectful. Morrison examined the graves. The barn where the shooting started, took note of the bullet holes and blood stains. His deputies collected the dead men's weapons and what personal effects they'd had. When they were done, Morrison stood in the kitchen, hat in hand. "Mrs. Mayhew, I've got to ask, did you know these men? Never saw them before they rode up. And they came here because they were tracking Mr. Ward." Ellie said simply. "Something about a dispute from his past. They made threats against both of us. We defended ourselves." Morrison turned to Caleb. "This dispute, it have anything to do with that Denver trouble?" Caleb met his gaze directly. "It might. Care to elaborate?" "Not particularly." The sheriff was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Here's what I know. 3 men are dead on this property. The physical evidence supports self-defense. Mrs. Mayhew is known as an honest woman who minds her business. You, Mr. Ward, are unknown to me, but clearly capable." He put his hat back on. "Here's what I don't know, and what I'm not going to ask too hard about. What exactly happened in Denver? Why those men were really here? What your intentions are going forward?" "Sheriff," Ellie started, but Morrison held up a hand. "Ma'am, I've been lawing in these parts for 20 years. Sometimes justice and law line up neat. Sometimes they don't. Those 3 men, I recognize the Paulson brothers. They've caused trouble from here to Durango. World's better off without them." He moved to the door, then turned back. "Mr. Ward, I'd suggest you consider moving on come spring. Fresh starts are easier where nobody knows your name. Mrs. Mayhew, you need anything from town, you send word." After they left, Caleb and Ellie stood in the kitchen, the weight of what just happened settling over them. "He knows," Caleb said. "He suspects, but he's choosing to look the other way." Ellie began making coffee, needing something to do with her hands. "Morrison's good people. His wife died 2 winters back. He understands what it means to be alone out here. I've put you at risk again." "No, we put those men in the ground together. That makes us both responsible." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. "Question is, what do we do now?" That afternoon, Caleb saddled his horse. Ellie watched from the porch, saying nothing. He'd made his decision. She wouldn't beg him to change it. "I'll be back by nightfall," he said, securing his rifle. "Where are you going?" "Town. Need to send some telegrams. Start making things right if I can." She nodded. "Be careful. Morrison may look the other way, but others might not." The ride to Grantsville took 2 hours through the snow. The town was small but busy, miners and ranchers going about their business. Caleb felt exposed, watched, though most people paid him no mind. The telegraph office was cramped and smelled of ink and tobacco. The operator, a thin man with nervous hands, took Caleb's messages without comment, though his eyes widened at the addresses: banks in Denver, law offices, a newspaper. "That's a lot of wires. Mister, send them." Caleb paid in cash. "And I need to know about a railroad guard killed last spring. Young man, Probably had family in Denver. Can you find out? Money loosened the operator's reluctance. Within an hour, Caleb had a name. Timothy Garrett, age 19. Mother and 2 sisters living in a boarding house on Larimer Street. Caleb composed one more telegram. This one to a lawyer in Denver. Instructions for the money. Where to send it. How to ensure the Garrett family received it without knowing the source. Conscience bothering you? The operator asked. Growing bold. Something like that. His next stop was the Mercantile. Supplies for the ranch. Yes, but also information. The store owner's wife was the town gossip, and she was eager to talk about the strangers who'd been asking questions a week back. Rough-looking men, she confided, leaning across the counter. Asking about newcomers, especially anyone from up north. Sheriff warned them off, but they hung around the saloon for days. They say what they wanted? Looking for someone, obviously. Someone who'd done them wrong, to hear them tell it. She lowered her voice further. Between you and me, I wasn't sorry to hear they'd met with misfortune. We don't need their kind here. Caleb made appropriate noises and finished his purchases. The picture was becoming clearer. Jenkins had kept the hunt quiet, but not silent. Others might come looking eventually. He was loading his horse when a voice called his name. Turning, he saw a young woman hurrying toward him, a shawl clutched tight against the cold. Mr. Ward, you're staying at the Mayhew place? I am. I'm Sarah Chen. My husband and I have the farm down valley from Ellie. She glanced around nervously. I wanted to thank you. For what? For being there. Ellie, she's been alone too long. After Thomas died, we tried to help, but she's proud, wouldn't take charity. Sarah smiled slightly. But having someone there, working the place, it's different. She seems lighter somehow. Mrs. Mayhew doesn't need anyone. She's managing fine. Managing and living aren't the same thing. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter. Just don't hurt her. Mr. Ward, she's had enough of that. Before he could respond, she was hurrying away. Caleb stood there, holding supplies for a ranch he might have to leave, thinking about the difference between managing and living. The ride back was cold and quiet. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising more snow. As he crested the ridge above the valley, Caleb paused. The homestead lay below. Smoke rising from the chimney, warm light in the windows. It looked like everything he'd ever wanted and could never have. Ellie met him at the barn, helping unload the supplies without asking about his errands. It wasn't until they were inside, warming by the fire, that she spoke. Did you do what you needed? Started to. It'll take time to finish. He stared into the flames. Found the boy's family. 3 women trying to make it on their own. The money will help them. That's good. Is it? Does it balance the scales? No, but it's still good. She moved to sit beside him. What else? People in town are talking about the strangers, about us. Your neighbor thanked me for being here. Sarah always was a romantic. She said you seemed lighter. Ellie was quiet for a moment. Maybe I am. Is that so wrong? Not wrong, just complicated. Everything's complicated. Caleb, that's what living is. She took his hand. You sent your telegrams. Started making amends. What happens now? Now I wait. The lawyer will handle the money. The authorities, we'll see. I may have to answer for what I did. And if they come for you, then I go. Face whatever's coming. He squeezed her hand. But not tonight. That night, another storm rolled in. They prepared together, securing the animals, bringing in extra wood, checking supplies, working in companionable silence. They'd developed a rhythm over the weeks, each knowing what needed doing, each trusting the other to do it. When the wind began to howl and snow lashed the windows, they retreated inside. Ellie made stew while Caleb mended harnesses. Buck dozed by the fire. Domestic, ordinary, precious. I've been thinking, Ellie said over dinner. About spring. Caleb tensed. Here it comes, he thought. The reasonable conversation about why he needed to leave. The east pasture needs fencing, and I want to expand the garden. Maybe add a root cellar. She met his eyes. It's too much for one person. Ellie, I'm not asking you to stay forever, but if you're here come spring, and if your conscience is clear enough, well, I could use the help. And if the law comes, then we deal with it, together. She pushed her plate away. I'm tired of being afraid, Caleb. Afraid of being alone, afraid of not being alone, afraid of wanting things I might lose. Fear keeps us alive. No, fear keeps us from dying. That's not the same as being alive. She stood, began clearing the table. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. Later, as the storm raged outside, they found themselves in her bed again. This time was different, less desperate, more deliberate. They moved together with the patience of people who might have time, who might have choices beyond tonight. After, Ellie traced the scars on his chest, mapping the geography of his survival. Tell me about the war. Why? Because it's part of you, because we can't build anything real on silence. So he talked about the battles, the fear, the strange brotherhood of soldiers, about the things he'd done to survive and the men who hadn't, about coming home to empty graves and how the war never really ended, just moved inside. Is that why you robbed the train? Because nothing mattered anymore? Maybe, or maybe I just wanted to feel something besides empty. He caught her hand, held it over his heart. First time I felt anything real was when you pointed that rifle at me. Glad I could help, she said dryly. They talked until the storm began to ease, sharing pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden. By dawn, they knew each other in ways that went beyond the physical. It was terrifying and necessary, and neither could say if it was love or just two lonely people finding shelter in each other. But when morning came, Caleb didn't saddle his horse. Instead, he fixed the gate that had been sticking, then started planning the spring fence line. Ellie watched from the window, a small smile on her face. One day at a time. She thought they could manage that. The letter came a week later, delivered by a rider who didn't stay for coffee. Caleb read it twice, then handed it to Ellie. The lawyer says the money's been distributed. The Garrett family, plus several others. Widows and Orphans Fund, like you suggested. He rubbed his face. Also says there's been questions from the Pinkertons. They might come looking. Might isn't will. It's not fair to you. Stop. She set the letter aside. You've done what you can to make amends. If they come, we'll face it. If they don't, we'll build fences and plant gardens. Either way, we go forward. Together? That's up to you. Caleb looked around the kitchen, at Buck sleeping in his corner, at the rifle by the door, at the woman who'd shot a man to save him and now offered him a future he didn't deserve. Together, he said. Outside. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, setting the snow to sparkling like scattered diamonds. Spring was still months away, but for the first time in longer than he could remember. Caleb Ward found himself looking forward to it. The remaining members of Jenkins's old gang arrived on a Tuesday morning in late February. Caleb was in the barn, repairing a bridle, when Buck's warning bark made him look up. Through the open door, he saw 5 riders approaching, spread wide, moving careful, professional. He set down the leather and moved to where his rifle leaned against the wall. Ellie emerged from the house, having heard the dog. Their eyes met across the yard, and she gave a slight nod. They'd discussed this possibility, planned for it. The lead rider was a thin man with pale eyes named Cole Mathis. Caleb recognized him from the old days. Smarter than Jenkins, more dangerous because of it. "Hello, Caleb," Mathis called out, stopping just beyond comfortable shooting range. "Been looking for you. Seems like everyone is these days." Caleb stepped into view, rifle held casual but ready. "What do you want? Cole?" "What's owed? Marcus and the Paulson boys didn't come back. Word is they found their way here." Mathis's eyes flicked to the house, to Ellie, standing in the doorway. "Nice setup you've got. They drew on us. We defended ourselves. Sheriff's already been out, cleared it as justified. I'm not talking about the law. Caleb, I'm talking about loyalty. Mathis leaned forward in his saddle. You rode with us, took our money, then turned on your own over some railroad guard. That guard was a kid. Marcus didn't have to kill him. But he did. And you beat him near to death for it, split our crew. His voice hardened. Now Marcus is dead, and you're playing farmer with some widow. How's that for loyalty? The other riders shifted restlessly. Caleb recognized two of them, Durant and Hobbs. Good with guns, but not much for thinking. The other two were strangers, probably hired muscle. I've got no quarrel with you. Cole, the money's gone, sent to people who needed it more than us. I'm done with the outlaw life. That's not how it works. Mathis straightened. You don't just walk away. Not after what you cost us. Then what? You shoot me down in front of witnesses? Bring the law down on all of you? Maybe. Or maybe we wait. Come back some night when you're not expecting it. Unless... Mathis smiled coldly. You could come with us. One last job. Pay your debt and we're square. No. Think about it. Caleb, your woman there. Pretty thing. Be a shame if something happened while you were out working the range. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Caleb's finger found the trigger. But before he could respond, Ellie's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Mathis, is it? She'd moved onto the porch, rifle in hand. I'm Ellie Mayhew. This is my land you're on. Ma'am. Mathis touched his hat mockingly. No offense intended. None taken yet, but you should know something. Her voice was steady as stone. The last men who came here making threats are feeding the worms in the back 40. You seem smarter than them. Smart enough to count, I hope. I count 5 of us, 2 of you. You count wrong. From the barn loft. Another rifle barrel appeared, then another from the woodshed. My neighbors and I have an arrangement. They hear shooting. They come running right now. You've got at least 4 rifles on you, probably more. It was a bluff, mostly. Sarah Chen was indeed in the loft. Her husband Robert in the woodshed. They'd seen the riders coming and responded to the prearranged signal. But there were no others. Mathis's eyes narrowed, calculating odds. This isn't over. Caleb. It is if you're smart. Caleb said, take your men and ride out. Don't come back. Find another way to make your living. One that doesn't end with a bullet or a rope. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Mathis wheeled his horse around. Let's go, boys. Nothing here worth dying for. They rode away slowly, making a point of not hurrying. Caleb didn't lower his rifle until they were specks in the distance. Sarah Chen climbed down from the loft, her hands shaking slightly. Lord, I thought they'd call the bluff for sure. You did good, Ellie told her. Both of you. Robert Chen emerged from the woodshed, a small man with steady eyes. They'll be back. Men like that don't forget. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe they'll find easier pickings elsewhere. The Chens stayed for coffee, everyone needing to settle their nerves. As they were leaving, Sarah pulled Ellie aside. We can't keep doing this. You need to think about what's best. I know what's best, Ellie replied. Having someone I can count on. After they left, Caleb found Ellie in the kitchen, staring out the window. He came up behind her, not touching, just present. They were right. Mathis will come back, or someone like him. This won't end until I'm dead or gone. Or until they are. She turned to face him. How many more are there? From the old gang? Maybe a dozen who might care enough to try something. Fewer who'd actually do it. Then we deal with them as they come. She moved past him to the stove. I'm making bread. You should check the stock. Make sure they didn't circle back. He caught her arm gently. Ellie, you can't live like this, always watching, waiting for the next threat. I lived like that for 2 years after Thomas died. At least now I'm not watching alone. She pulled free. Go check the stock. Caleb, let me know if trouble's coming. That night, they sat up late planning. Where to position watchers, how to signal for help, which neighbors could be counted on. It felt like preparing for war, which in a way it was. I could leave, Caleb said finally. Draw them away. We've had this conversation. The answer's still no. But if you want to leave because you want to leave, then go. But don't leave thinking you're protecting me. She leaned back in her chair. I made my choice the day I shot Jenkins. I'm in this now, for better or worse. Like a marriage. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Ellie went very still. Is that what this is to you? She asked carefully. I don't know. Maybe. Is that crazy? Probably. She stood, moved to the window. We've known each other 2 months. Been together for less. That's no foundation for marriage. We've killed together. Faced death together. That has to count for something. It does, but marriage. She turned back to him. Thomas and I courted for a year. Had a proper wedding. Made promises in front of God and everyone. Look how that ended. This doesn't have to end the same way. Everything ends. Caleb. The question is what we do with the time we have. He rose, crossed to her. Then what do? We survive. We build. We take what happiness we can. She touched his face. And maybe, if we're very lucky, we get enough time to know if this is love or just two people holding on to each other in a storm. And if it's both, then we're blessed and cursed in equal measure. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, aware that each time might be the last. After, they lay entwined, making the kinds of promises that only darkness allows. If something happens to me, Caleb started, nothing will happen. But if it does, the homestead is yours. But I've got some money put aside. Clean money from before. It's in a bank in St. Louis under the name Ward Thompson. The papers are in my saddlebag. Caleb, promise me you'll take it. Start over somewhere if you need to. I'm not starting over. This is my home. Promise me. She was quiet for a long time. Then, only if you promise the same. If something happens to me, you don't go back to the outlaw life. You find somewhere quiet and you build something good. Ellie, promise. I promise. They sealed it with a kiss, both knowing that some promises are made to be broken by grief. The next weeks passed in tense normalcy. They worked the ranch, always armed, always watching. The neighbors organized patrols. Sheriff Morrison made a point of riding out twice a week, letting it be known the law was present, slowly, carefully. Life went on. The fence got built. The garden got planned. Caleb helped Robert Chen repair his barn roof, and in return, Robert helped them dig the foundation for a root cellar. It was during this work, shirts off in the surprising warmth of a March afternoon, that Ellie noticed the scar on Robert's back, a puckered circle she recognized. Bullet wound? She asked quietly while the men were hauling stones. Sarah nodded. From his mining days. There was a dispute over claims. Robert doesn't talk about it, but I know he killed a man defending what was his. She watched her husband work. Good men do hard things sometimes, doesn't make them less good. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, a rider approached. Everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons, but it was just a boy from town with a telegram. Caleb read it twice, his face going pale. What is it? Ellie asked. My sister. She's alive. He looked up, stunned. I was told she died with Margaret and Clara, but she's in Chicago. She's been looking for me. That's wonderful. Ellie squeezed his hand. You should write to her. Yes, but she wants to see me. Wants me to come to Chicago. The implications hung between them. Leaving now, even for family, meant leaving Ellie vulnerable. But this was his sister, his only remaining family. You should go, Ellie said firmly. Ellie, she's your blood. You thought she was dead. You can't not go. And leave you here alone, with Mathis still out there. I won't be alone. The Chens, the other neighbors, will manage. For how long? A week? 2? What if Mathis comes while I'm gone? Then I'll handle it like I handled Jenkins. She stood, began clearing plates. Don't use me as an excuse to avoid your family. Caleb. The argument continued for 3 days, back and forth, neither giving ground. Finally, Caleb proposed a compromise. Come with me. Ellie stopped mid-motion, a dish towel in her hands. To Chicago? Why not? Meet my sister. See the city. We could even... He paused, gathering courage. We could get married there. Make it official. Caleb Ward, are you proposing to me? I'm trying to... badly, apparently. She sat down slowly. You want to marry me. I want to know you're protected if something happens. I want the right to stand beside you official-like. I want... He reached for her hand. I want whatever time we have to mean something. It already means something. Then let's make it something the whole world has to recognize. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd refuse. Then, not in Chicago. Here, on our land, with our people as witnesses. But my sister can come here if she wants to meet your wife. This is our home. Caleb, this is where we make our stand. He smiled then. The first real smile she'd seen in days. Is that a yes? That's a yes to marriage. No to running off to Chicago. She squeezed his hand. Write to your sister. Invite her here. Spring wedding, when the wildflowers bloom. And if Mathis comes before then we'll handle it. Together. As husband and wife. Official or not. That night, Caleb wrote 2 letters. One to his sister, full of explanations and invitations and hope. The other to a lawyer in Denver, making provisions for Ellie if the worst happened. Outside, the March wind howled, carrying the promise of spring and the threat of violence in equal measure. But inside, by the warm fire, 2 people planned a future they might not live to see, and found joy in the planning itself. June, Ellie said, looking at an old calendar. June wedding. The roses will be blooming. If we make it to June. She looked at him sharply. We'll make it. Pure stubbornness, if nothing else. Speaking of stubborn, what about the house? It's small for a family. Family? Her eyebrows rose. Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you? Maybe, but a man can hope. A man can build another room is what a man can do. Maybe 2. Children need space. Children, plural. I'm not getting any younger. Caleb Ward. If we're doing this, we're doing it proper. He pulled her close, kissed her soundly. Yes, ma'am, whatever you say. Remember that when I'm big as a house and cranky as a bear, I'll remember everything. He promised. Every moment we get. Outside, snow began to fall again. Spring snow. Wet and heavy, but quick to melt. Tomorrow would bring sunshine and mud and the endless work of the ranch. It would bring danger, too, the constant threat of Mathis and his men. But tonight, they had each other and plans for June roses and children who might never be. It was enough. It had to be. In the morning, they'd send the letters and face whatever came. Together. Spring arrived in fits and starts, teasing with warm days followed by late freezes. Caleb threw himself into the work of expansion, framing the new rooms, setting posts for the expanded garden, building for a future that still felt fragile as morning frost. His sister's letter came in early April. She would come for the wedding, bringing her husband and children. Reading it aloud to Ellie, Caleb's voice caught on the details. His nephew named after him, a niece with their mother's eyes. Family you didn't know you had. Ellie said softly. That's a gift. It's a complication. More people to put at risk. Or more people to stand with us. She took the letter, reading it again. Your sister sounds formidable. I've searched for you for 7 years, Caleb Samuel Ward, and I'll not lose you again to whatever foolishness you've gotten yourself into. Rebecca always was bossy. I like her already. They were in the new garden plot, Caleb turning soil while Ellie planted early vegetables, when Sheriff Morrison rode up. His face told them it wasn't a social call. Got word you should know about, he said without preamble. Cole Mathis and 4 others robbed a bank in Durango last week. Killed a guard. Federal marshals are hunting them now. Caleb leaned on his shovel. That's good news, isn't it? Maybe. Or maybe it makes them desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. Morrison looked between them. Might be time to reconsider that trip to Chicago. We're getting married in June. Ellie said firmly. "Here, you're invited, Sheriff." Morrison almost smiled. "Wouldn't miss it, ma'am. Just hope we all make it that far." After he left, they worked in silence, each lost in thought. That night, Caleb cleaned and loaded every weapon they owned while Ellie wrote invitations with stubborn determination. "We should tell people," she said. "About Mathis. Give them the choice to come or not. You think they'll stay away? I think they'll come armed." She sealed another envelope. "This is our community. We stand together or we fall apart." The response was immediate and heartening. Sarah Chen organized the women to plan the celebration while Robert coordinated with the men on security. The pastor agreed to perform the ceremony but suggested they might want to have it in town, where the sheriff could provide better protection. "No," Ellie said flatly. "On our land, under our sky. That's not negotiable." Word spread beyond their immediate circle. Ranchers who'd barely spoken to Ellie since Thomas died sent congratulations. The town seamstress offered to alter Ellie's mother's wedding dress, packed away these many years. Even the taciturn blacksmith volunteered to stand watch during the ceremony. "Why?" Caleb asked him. "You don't know me." "No, Mrs. Mayhew. Good woman. Deserves happiness." The big man spat tobacco juice. "Besides, nobody likes outlaws disrupting weddings. Bad for business." May bloomed spectacular. Wildflowers carpeting the meadows in purple and gold. Caleb and Ellie worked dawn to dusk, racing to finish the house additions before the wedding. The new bedroom was complete, waiting for furniture. The second room, smaller, facing east for morning sun, they left unfinished inside but weatherproof. "Nursery?" Sarah asked, catching Ellie touching her stomach thoughtfully. "Maybe. Hopefully." Ellie smiled. "Seems like tempting fate to say. Fate's already been tempted plenty. Might as well dream big." Rebecca Ward Harrison arrived the first week of June with her family in tow. She was smaller than Caleb but had the same determined jaw, the same steady eyes. She took one look at her brother and burst into tears. 7 years. She sobbed against his chest. 7 years thinking you were dead. I'm sorry. Becca, I thought... They told me you died with Margaret. I was in Boston when the fever came. By the time I got back... She pulled away, studying his face. You look older, harder. I am older, maybe harder too. And this is the woman who's saving you? She turned to Ellie with keen eyes. Thank you for giving me back my brother. He saved himself. Ellie said, I just gave him a place to do it. Rebecca stayed at the house, her husband James and their children taking a room in town. She threw herself into wedding preparations with an energy that reminded Caleb why he'd both loved and been exasperated by his sister growing up. She needs flowers in her hair, Rebecca declared, braiding wildflowers into a crown. And you need a proper suit. I have a suit. You have clothes. There's a difference. She attacked him with a measuring tape. James will take you to town tomorrow. No arguments. That evening, Caleb found Ellie on the hill behind the house, sitting beside Thomas's grave. He settled beside her, not speaking. I told him, she said eventually. About us. Asked his blessing, I suppose. And gravestones aren't much for conversation. She leaned against Caleb's shoulder. But I think he'd understand. He always wanted me to be happy. Are you happy? Ask me after the wedding, when we've faced whatever's coming and survived it. You think Mathis will come. I think a wedding's too good a target to pass up, all of us gathered, distracted by joy. She stood, brushing off her skirts. But let him come. We'll be ready. The night before the wedding, they held a gathering at the ranch. Friends, neighbors, Rebecca's family, even Sheriff Morrison out of uniform. The house overflowed with laughter and music. Robert Chen played fiddle while his wife sang. Stories were told, toasts were made, and for a few hours the shadow of violence seemed distant. Caleb stood on the porch, watching Ellie dance with James, her face alight with uncomplicated happiness. Rebecca joined him, linking her arm through his. She's good for you. Better than I deserve. Stop that. She squeezed his arm. Whatever you've done, Wherever you've been, you're still my brother. Still the boy who taught me to ride and shoot and stand up for myself. That boy's long gone. Becca? No. He's just buried deep. She's helping you dig him out. She watched Ellie spin, laughing. Don't let fear rob you of this. Caleb, you've paid enough penance. Later, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Caleb walked Ellie to her door, tradition demanding they spend this last night apart. They stood on the threshold, neither wanting to part. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. He kissed her gently. Whatever comes after? Whatever comes after, she agreed. But sleep eluded him. Caleb sat up in the spare room, cleaning his pistol by lamplight, running through defensive positions in his mind. Around midnight, Buck started growling, low, continuous. Caleb was on his feet instantly. Weapon in hand, he found Ellie already at her window, rifle ready. Northwest, she whispered. By the tree line. They watched, tense, until a deer broke from cover, bounding across the meadow. Buck settled, embarrassed by his error. But the moment had shattered any pretense of rest. Coffee? Ellie suggested. They sat in the kitchen, weapons close, watching the darkness beyond the windows. Second thoughts? Caleb asked. About marrying you? No, about doing it in daylight with a target on our backs? Maybe, she smiled wryly. But I'm stubborn that way. I've noticed. Dawn came gray and misty, burning off slow to reveal a perfect June day. The house filled again. Rebecca commandeering the bedroom to help Ellie dress. Neighbor women taking over the kitchen. Men setting up chairs in the meadow where wildflowers swayed in the breeze. Caleb stood with James and Robert, accepting their help with his new suit, their gentle mockery of his nervousness. Sheriff Morrison arrived early. Deputies placed strategic around the property. Any word? Caleb asked quietly. Nothing specific, but my gut says today. Too good an opportunity. Morrison adjusted his coat, revealing the badge still pinned inside. We're ready if they come. The ceremony was set for noon. As the hour approached, guests assembled, ranchers and townspeople, miners and merchants, all come to witness something good in a hard land. The pastor took his place, Bible in hand. Musicians tuned their instruments. Caleb stood at the makeshift altar, James beside him as best man, trying not to fidget with his collar. His eyes swept the tree line, the ridges, anywhere trouble might emerge. Then the music started, and Ellie appeared on Robert Chen's arm, and the rest of the world ceased to matter. She wore her mother's dress, altered to fit, with Rebecca's crown of wildflowers in her hair. But it was her face that stopped his heart, radiant, determined, looking at him like he was the only man in the world. The walk seemed eternal and too brief. Then she was beside him, taking his hands, and the pastor was speaking words about love and commitment and the bonds that death cannot break. Do you, Caleb Samuel Ward, take this woman? A glint of sunlight on metal from the eastern ridge. Caleb's combat instinct screamed, but he couldn't move, couldn't break this moment. The shot cracked across the meadow. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. But it was Mathis who fell, tumbling from his sniper's perch. Morrison's deputy standing over him with a smoking rifle. Go! Morrison shouted. All positions. Chaos erupted. The wedding guests, prepared for this possibility, took cover with surprising order. Armed men returned fire as more outlaws emerged from concealment. Women hustled children to the safety of the house. Caleb pushed Ellie behind the altar, solid oak planks that might stop a bullet. She had her pistol out from beneath her wedding dress, eyes fierce. So much for tradition, she said. The firefight was brief but intense. Mathis's men, expecting easy targets, found themselves facing a small army. 2 outlaws fell in the first volley. Another threw down his weapon, hands high. The last tried to flee but ran straight into Rebecca, who dropped him with a derringer she'd had since age 16. In minutes, it was over. The meadow that had been prepared for celebration now held the wounded and dead. But none of the wedding party had been seriously hurt. Preparation and Morrison's vigilance had made the difference. "Is it finished?" Ellie asked, emerging from cover, her wedding dress dusty but intact. Morrison surveyed the scene. "Mathis is dead. 2 others. 1 captured. 1 might live if the doc hurries." He looked at Caleb. "Any more out there we should know about?" "No, this was all of them that mattered." "Then I'd say you're free and clear. Mr. Ward." Morrison turned to the pastor, who had taken cover behind a barrel but still clutched his Bible. "Padre, I believe you are in the middle of something?" The pastor looked at the scene, the scattered chairs, the armed guests, the bride and groom dusty but determined, and cleared his throat. Should we move somewhere else?" "No," Ellie said firmly. "We finish what we started, here, now." And so they did, with bodies being removed and weapons being put away, with the smell of gunpowder mixing with wildflowers. Caleb and Ellie spoke their vows. The words seemed to carry more weight for having been tested by fire. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor said, clearly eager to be done. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb pulled Ellie close, not caring about the dust or blood or the audience of battle-weary neighbors. The kiss was fierce and sweet and tasted like victory. The celebration after was subdued but genuine. Tables were reset, food served, music played with perhaps more feeling for having nearly been silenced. Morrison stayed long enough to finish the legal matters, then left with his prisoners. "Hell of a wedding," he told Caleb, shaking hands. "But then, nothing about you two has been conventional." As evening fell, the guests departed with embraces and promises to help rebuild what had been damaged. Rebecca hugged them both, tears streaming. "I have my brother back," she whispered, "and a new sister. Be happy, both of you." Finally, they were alone. Caleb and Ellie stood in their meadow, surveying the churned ground, the overturned chairs, the altar scarred by bullets. "Not quite the wedding you dreamed of," Caleb said. "No," Ellie agreed. "It was better. We faced the worst together and won. Everything else is just details." They walked back to the house hand in hand. In the doorway, Caleb paused, then swept Ellie up in his arms. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my wife over the threshold. Some traditions are worth keeping." She laughed, arms around his neck. "Then by all means, husband, carry on." Inside, the house felt different, fuller somehow, blessed by community and sealed by sacrifice. They'd built something here, something worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. "No regrets?" Caleb asked later, as they lay in their marriage bed, moonlight painting silver squares on the floor. "None," Ellie said firmly. "We're alive. We're together. We're free. What more could I want? A quieter life. Quiet's overrated." She traced the scar on his face, then kissed it. "I'll take interesting over quiet any day. Careful what you wish for, Mrs. Ward." "I'm not wishing anymore," she said. "I have everything I need." Outside, night sounds filled the air, owls calling, wind in the pines, the eternal whisper of the mountains. Inside, 2 people who had saved each other held tight and began the rest of their lives, knowing that whatever came, they would face it as they had everything else, together. The seasons turned, each bringing its own rhythms and revelations. That first summer as husband and wife, Caleb and Ellie worked the land with renewed purpose. The garden flourished, the new room stood ready for whatever future might fill them, and slowly the shadow of violence faded into memory. By autumn, Ellie's suspicions were confirmed. She told Caleb on a golden September morning as they picked apples in the small orchard Thomas had planted years before. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply, watching his face. Caleb nearly dropped the basket he was holding. We're sometime in early spring. I think Doc Morrison confirmed it yesterday." He crossed to her in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet in a careful embrace. "A baby. Our baby. Put me down, you fool. I'm not made of glass." But he held her a moment longer, face buried in her hair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it. A child, a future that extended beyond survival into genuine hope. "Are you happy?" she asked when he finally set her down. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He touched her still flat stomach with reverent hands. Terrified might be closer. "Good, I'd worry if you weren't." She covered his hands with hers. "We've faced worse things than a baby. Caleb Ward." "Have we, though?" But he was smiling, already imagining a small face with Ellie's eyes, tiny hands to guide and protect. Winter came early that year, blanketing the mountains in deep snow by November. But the house was warm and tight, the larder full, the animals secure. Caleb had learned the rhythms of ranching life, when to worry and when to trust in preparation and providence. Ellie grew round with child as the months passed. Beautiful in her increasing discomfort, she refused to slow down, waddling through her chores with determined efficiency until Caleb threatened to tie her to a chair. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me, woman. That's my child you're carrying. Our child. And they need to know their mother isn't some delicate flower." But she did accept help, letting Sarah Chen assist with heavier work, allowing Caleb to fuss over her in the evenings. They spent the long winter nights by the fire, planning names, debating whether it would be boy or girl, reading aloud from the books Rebecca had sent from Chicago. "If it's a boy," Ellie said one night, "I'd like to name him after Thomas, if you don't mind." Caleb considered this. "Thomas Caleb Ward. Has a good sound." "And if it's a girl?" "Margaret," he said without hesitation. "After my first wife, she'd have loved you. I think, would have been glad I found you." "Margaret Ellie Ward." Ellie tested the name. "Little Maggie. You think it's a girl?" "I think she kicks like a mule, so probably." She shifted, trying to find comfort. "Your daughter's already stubborn as her father." The labor started on a wild March night, wind howling around the eaves like it had the night Caleb first arrived. But this time, the house was full of warmth and purpose. Sarah Chen took charge, having delivered dozens of babies over the years. Caleb was banished to the kitchen where Robert kept him company and relatively calm. "First baby's always the longest," Robert said, pouring whiskey. "My oldest took 18 hours coming into this world." Caleb paled. 18 hours. Could be more, could be less. Women are strong. Caleb, stronger than us by far. The hours crawled by. Ellie's cries pierced the night, each one a knife in Caleb's heart. Dawn was breaking when Sarah finally emerged, exhausted but smiling. "You have a daughter, healthy and loud as her mother." Caleb flew up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Ellie lay propped against pillows, hair damp with sweat, face drawn with exhaustion but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in one of Rebecca's quilts, was the smallest human being Caleb had ever seen. "Meet your daughter," Ellie whispered. Caleb approached like the bed was an altar, sinking to his knees beside them. The baby's face was red and wrinkled, topped with dark fuzz, perfect in every way. "She's beautiful," he breathed. "You're beautiful, both of you. Would you like to hold her?" His hands shook as Ellie transferred the precious bundle. His daughter weighed nothing and everything, fitting into his scarred hands like she belonged there. Her eyes opened, blue like all newborns but already sharp, already seeing. "Hello, little Maggie," he whispered. "I'm your papa. I promise I'll do better by you than I've done by most things in my life." The baby yawned, unimpressed by his vows, and Caleb felt his heart reconstruct itself around this tiny person. Spring came slow and sweet that year. Caleb carried Maggie around the ranch, showing her everything: the horses, the chickens, the garden beginning to green. Ellie laughed at his earnest explanations to someone who couldn't possibly understand. "She needs to know her home," he insisted. "Every rock, every tree. She needs to sleep is what she needs. Give her here." But Ellie was just as bad, singing to Maggie as they worked, telling her stories of her namesakes, of the land that would one day be hers. The christening was held in May, a year after their bullet-marked wedding. The same community gathered, this time in pure celebration. Sheriff Morrison, promoted to marshal now, stood as godfather. Seems fitting, he said, holding Maggie awkwardly. I helped bring her parents together in a roundabout way by not arresting me, Caleb pointed out. Details. Morrison handed the baby back quickly when she began to fuss. Point is, she's got a whole town looking out for her. It was true. Gifts arrived daily. Quilts and clothes, carved toys and practical supplies. The violence of the previous year had bonded the community, and Maggie was treated as everyone's child, a symbol of hope after hardship. Rebecca visited that summer, bringing her whole family, watching his sister with his daughter, seeing his nephew teach Maggie to laugh. Caleb felt the last walls around his heart crumble. This was what he'd been running toward all those years, even when he thought he was running away. You did it, Rebecca told him one evening as they sat on the porch. You found your way home. This isn't Connecticut. Home isn't a place. Caleb, it's people. It's purpose. She gestured to where Ellie was hanging laundry, Maggie in a sling against her chest. It's knowing where you belong. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. 2 more children followed. Thomas, born during a blizzard that trapped them for a week, and Clara, who arrived on a perfect autumn day when the aspens were gold. The house expanded again, rooms added, life filling every corner. Caleb learned to be a father through trial and error, patience and love. He taught his children to ride and shoot, yes, but also to read and question and stand for what was right. Ellie tempered his protective instincts with her practical wisdom, raising children who were strong but kind, capable but compassionate. The ghosts of his past never fully disappeared, sometimes working the fields. He'd remember other fields where men had died, sometimes watching his children play. He'd think of the boy from the train who'd never had the chance. But the guilt transformed over time from a weight to a reminder of how far he'd come, of what he'd do differently, of the preciousness of the life he'd built. On their 10th anniversary, Ellie found him on the hill beside Thomas's grave. It had become his thinking spot over the years, a place to wrestle with the past and plan for the future. The children are asking for you, she said, settling beside him. Something about a promised fishing trip. In a moment, he took her hand, threading their fingers together. I was just thinking about that first night, when you held a rifle on me in the barn. Best decision I ever made, letting you stay, even with everything that followed. Especially with everything that followed. She leaned into him. We've built something good here, Caleb, something that matters. He looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and rough, hers strong and capable, both marked by work and years and the building of a life. Do you think we've been forgiven for the things we did? Ellie considered this, watching an eagle circle high above. I think forgiveness isn't a thing you receive once and for all. It's a thing you work toward every day, in how you live, in what you build, in what you leave behind. Then we keep building. Then we keep building. She agreed. They walked back to the house together, where their children waited with fishing poles and eager faces. Maggie, nearly 10 now, and the image of her mother, had her younger siblings organized and ready. Thomas, 7, carried the bait bucket with serious determination. Clara, 5, danced around them all, singing a song about fish and rivers and summer sun. Papa, she cried, running to him. You're too slow. Am I now? He scooped her up, settling her on his shoulders. Then we'd better hurry. They set out as a family toward the stream that ran through the eastern pasture, parents and children, dog running ahead, the afternoon stretching golden before them, behind them. The house stood solid against the mountains, smoke rising peaceful from the chimney, garden growing green and promising. As they walked, Ellie began one of her stories, weaving tales of brave knights and clever princesses that had the children enthralled. Caleb listened with half an ear, watching his family, marveling at the simple perfection of the moment. Once, he'd carried $30,000 in blood money and the weight of unbearable guilt. Now he carried his daughter on his shoulders and the responsibility of 3 young lives. The exchange seemed more than fair. "Papa," Thomas asked, falling into step beside him, "will you teach me to track deer like you promised?" "This weekend," Caleb agreed. "But fishing first, and then tracking, and then shooting, and then one thing at a time." Sun. At the stream. They spread out along the bank, lines in the water, sun warm on their faces. Clara gave up fishing almost immediately, choosing instead to build fairy houses from stones and moss. The boys competed to see who could catch the first fish. Ellie and Caleb sat close, keeping watch, sharing the comfortable silence of a decade's partnership. "No regrets?" he asked, their old question. "Not one," she replied, their old answer. A shout from Thomas. He'd hooked something. Everyone rushed to help, advice flying, excitement building. The fish, when landed, was barely bigger than Caleb's hand, but Thomas beamed like he'd caught a whale. "We'll have a feast tonight," he declared. "Indeed we will," Ellie agreed solemnly. "A mighty feast." They stayed by the stream until the sun began to sink, painting the mountains purple and gold. Walking home, Clara asleep in Caleb's arms, the boys running ahead with their catch, Ellie began to sing. Her voice rose clear and true in the evening air, an old hymn about amazing grace and souls finding rest. Caleb joined her on the chorus, his rougher voice blending with hers. The children picked up the words, even sleepy Clara mumbling along. Their voices carried across their land, past the barn where it all began, past the graves of men who'd learned too late that violence brings only violence, past the spot where vows were spoken amid gunfire, to the house that had become a home. As they reached the door, Maggie turned to her parents. "Tell us the story again, about how you met?" "Which version?" Ellie asked, eyes twinkling. "The one where your papa was a frozen vagrant I took pity on, or the one where he was a dangerous outlaw who reformed for love?" "Both," Thomas insisted. "Tell both. After supper," Caleb promised. "And only if you help your mother with the dishes." Groans and protests, but they filed inside. The boys to clean their fish, Maggie to set the table, Clara to wash her muddy hands. Caleb paused in the doorway, looking back at the land they'd claimed together, forward at the family they'd created. Once, he'd paid for shelter with money and received judgment. Now, he paid with work and love and received a life beyond his wildest dreams. The widow had given him more than redemption. She'd given him the chance to become the man he was meant to be. "Coming?" Ellie called from inside. "Coming," he answered, and stepped through the doorway into warmth and light and the voices of his children. Home at last. The door closed behind him as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Watching over the ranch in the valley where second chances bloomed like wildflowers after rain, where broken people had learned to be whole, where love had proven stronger than lead and determination fiercer than fear. And in the house below, a family gathered around the table, heads bowed in gratitude for the day given and the days to come, for the journey that had brought them together, for the grace that had seen them through. "Amen," they said together, and began their feast, one small fish and infinite blessings, shared in the glow of lamplight while outside the mountains stood eternal guard and the wind whispered stories of redemption to any soul brave enough to listen. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. If you enjoyed following Caleb and Ellie's journey from that cold winter night to their warm family home, please leave a comment sharing where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with fellow Western romance enthusiasts around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, redemption, and love in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about the story below. What moment touched your heart the most? Until our next adventure, partners.